The strange thing about losing hope is that nobody notices the exact moment it happens. Rain tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Moretti estate, a sprawling stone mansion overlooking the Hudson River. Beyond the glass, the lights of New York shimmered through the storm like distant stars. Inside, everything was silent. Too silent. Vincent Moretti sat motionless in his custom wheelchair, his hands resting on the armrests polished smooth by 2 decades of use. At 42 years old, he was one of the most powerful men on the East Coast. Newspapers called him a business legend. Rivals called him untouchable. Employees called him Sir. But none of those names mattered anymore. For 20 years, the lower half of his body had remained still, immune to every surgery, every therapy session, every medical breakthrough money could buy. He had traveled to Boston, Houston, Los Angeles, even overseas. Specialists studied his condition. Researchers reviewed his scans. Doctors promised possibilities, then quietly admitted defeat. Over time, Vincent stopped asking questions. Then he stopped expecting answers. Eventually, he stopped caring. A grandfather clock echoed through the mansion. 9 o'clock. His eyes drifted toward a stack of documents waiting on the mahogany desk nearby. Transfer agreements. Corporate succession papers. Signatures that would place his empire into the hands of others. His legal team thought he was planning for the future. The truth was simpler. Vincent no longer wanted one. The room smelled faintly of leather, cedarwood, and rain. Expensive things. Beautiful things. Things that meant nothing. Across the hall, staff members moved quietly, careful not to disturb him. Everyone in the house had learned the same lesson years ago. Mr. Moretti preferred silence. He preferred distance. He preferred to be left alone. The truth was, loneliness had become easier than disappointment. A soft knock interrupted the quiet. Vincent didn't turn around. "What is it?" he asked. The voice of his longtime assistant answered from the doorway. "Sir, the new caregiver arrived this evening." Vincent closed his eyes. Another one. The 7th this year. The previous 6 had lasted anywhere from 3 days to 3 weeks. Some were intimidated. Some were overly sympathetic. Others treated him like a medical project. They all eventually left. "Send her home," Vincent said flatly. "She's already signed the contract, sir." "Then pay her and send her home tomorrow." A brief pause followed. "There's something else." Vincent's jaw tightened. "What?" "She brought her son." For the first time in several minutes, Vincent turned away from the rain-darkened window. His expression hardened. Why would she bring a child here? Apparently, she couldn't find childcare tonight. Vincent looked away again. Not his problem. Nothing was. "Handle it," he said. The assistant hesitated before quietly leaving the room. Silence returned. Rain continued tapping against the glass. Somewhere deep inside the mansion, a door opened. Then came something unusual. Something that hadn't been heard inside these walls for a very long time. Laughter. Small. Genuine. A child's laughter. Vincent's fingers tightened slightly against the wheelchair armrest. The sound echoed faintly through the corridor before fading away. He stared at the storm outside, trying to ignore it. But for reasons he couldn't explain, the empty room suddenly felt a little less empty. The next morning arrived wrapped in gray clouds, and the smell of fresh coffee drifting through the enormous mansion. Emily Carter stood alone in the staff kitchen, nervously smoothing the sleeves of her inexpensive sweater while reviewing the schedule she had been handed less than an hour earlier. The paper listed medications, appointments, therapy sessions, meal times, and emergency contacts. Every line seemed designed for someone with years of experience. Emily swallowed hard. She had taken difficult jobs before. She had worked double shifts at diners, cleaned offices after midnight, and spent countless weekends juggling bills while raising Noah alone. But nothing about this place felt ordinary. The kitchen alone was larger than the apartment she rented. A soft thump of sneakers against hardwood interrupted her thoughts. Noah appeared carrying a bowl of cereal almost as large as his head. "Mom, this house has 3 staircases." Emily smiled despite her nerves. "Then promise me you will only use one of them." Noah grinned. "I counted 18 windows in my room." "That is because it is not really your room. It feels like my room." Emily could not argue with that. The guest suite they had been assigned was larger than any bedroom Noah had ever slept in. For a moment, guilt tugged at her chest. Children should not get attached to temporary places. Temporary things had a habit of disappearing. Before she could answer, a housekeeper entered the kitchen. Mr. Moretti is ready for breakfast. Emily nodded and followed her through a maze of hallways lined with paintings, antique furniture, and photographs from decades past. The mansion felt less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to a life that had stopped moving forward years ago. When they reached the dining room, Vincent was already there. Morning light spilled through towering windows behind him. He sat at the far end of a table built to seat 20 people. Yet only one place setting had been prepared. Emily paused. Something about the scene felt sadder than she expected. Not because of the wheelchair. Not because of the wealth. Because nobody should have breakfast alone at a table that large. Vincent glanced up from a newspaper. You are late. Emily checked the clock. It was exactly 8 o'clock. No, I am on time. The room became very quiet. The housekeeper looked horrified. Vincent lowered the newspaper slowly. Most people apologized immediately when confronted by him. Most people became nervous. Emily simply stood there holding a tray. A faint crease appeared between Vincent's eyebrows. You are direct. I am honest. Their eyes met for a brief second. Then, unexpectedly, Vincent returned to reading. That will either help you here or get you fired. Emily set down his breakfast. I guess we will find out. Across the room, a sudden burst of laughter echoed through the hallway. Noah's voice. Bright. Fearless. Vincent's eyes lifted from the newspaper before he could stop himself. It lasted only a second, but Emily noticed. For the first time since arriving, she saw something break. Through the wall around him. Not happiness. Not yet. Curiosity. And after 20 years of silence, curiosity was a beginning. 3 days passed, and something unusual began happening inside the Moretti estate. People smiled more. Not often. Not dramatically. Just enough to notice. The cooks lingered longer in the kitchen. The housekeepers exchanged quiet conversations in the hallways. Even the security staff seemed less tense. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone knew why. Noah, the 7-year-old, had somehow accomplished what millions of dollars, dozens of specialists, and 20 years of carefully managed routines could not. He made the mansion feel alive. One rainy afternoon, Emily was organizing medication schedules in the library when she realized the house had become unusually quiet. Too quiet. She immediately looked around for Noah. He was not in the guest suite. Not in the kitchen. Not in the indoor game room. A small wave of panic rose in her chest. Noah, she called while moving through the hallway. No answer. She checked the grand staircase. Then the sunroom. Then the east wing. Finally, she heard a familiar voice drifting from the conservatory at the back of the mansion. That move was terrible. Emily froze. A second voice answered. Excuse me. She recognized Vincent immediately. Emily stepped carefully toward the doorway and looked inside. Noah sat across from Vincent at a small wooden table. Between them rested a chessboard. Vincent stared at the board with narrowed eyes. Noah looked entirely unimpressed. You left your queen open, Noah explained. That is because I was setting a trap. Noah nodded seriously. It was not a very good trap. For a moment, Emily thought Vincent might end the conversation. Instead, something remarkable happened. The corner of his mouth twitched upward. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. Noah moved a piece. Check. Vincent studied the board. You let me win yesterday. Noah shrugged. You looked sad. The room fell silent. Emily watched Vincent's expression change. The answer had been delivered with the simple honesty only children possess. No manipulation. No pity. No fear. Just truth. Noah leaned forward. My mom says people get sad when they spend too much time alone. Vincent looked away from the chessboard. Rain tapped softly against the glass ceiling above them. Your mother tells you that? She says everybody needs somebody. Noah paused. Do you have somebody? The question hung in the air. Emily almost stepped into the room to rescue Vincent from answering. But she stopped herself. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Vincent looked toward the rain-covered windows. Not anymore. Noah considered that carefully. Then he smiled. You can borrow us until you find somebody. Emily felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. Vincent remained perfectly still. His eyes stayed fixed on the window. Yet something behind them seemed to shift, like a door opening somewhere deep inside a house abandoned for years. Then Noah pointed at the chessboard. Also checkmate. Vincent looked down. He had indeed lost. Again. This time, however, he did not seem to mind. And for the first time since Emily arrived at the estate, she saw something she never expected to witness. Vincent Moretti laughed. It was quiet. Brief, rusty from lack of use. But it was real. The following week settled into a rhythm nobody inside the estate could have predicted. Every morning Noah raced downstairs before breakfast. Every afternoon Emily completed her duties while keeping one eye on her son. And almost every evening, somehow, the boy ended up wherever Vincent happened to be. One Thursday, the sky turned golden as the setting sun poured through the mansion's western windows. Emily was organizing medical files when a familiar melody drifted softly through the hallway. She stopped. The sound was faint, gentle. Someone was humming. For a moment, she thought it was a recording. Then she realized the music was coming from her. She had been humming without noticing, the same lullaby she sang to Noah since he was a baby. The tune followed her as she carried a stack of folders toward the study. When she reached the doorway, she froze. Vincent was staring at her. Not at the folders. Not at the paperwork. At her. His expression had completely changed. The color drained from his face. "Where did you learn that song?" he asked quietly. Emily blinked. "What song?" "The one you were humming." She thought for a second. "My mother used to sing it." Vincent gripped the armrest of his wheelchair. "Your mother?" Emily nodded. "Every night when I was little." The room became strangely still. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed louder. Vincent looked away first. What was her name? The question felt unexpected. Personal. Yet there was something in his voice that made her answer. "Sarah Carter." Vincent lowered his eyes. For several seconds he said nothing at all. Emily wondered if she had somehow upset him. Then Noah burst into the room carrying a sketch pad under one arm. "I finished it," he announced proudly. The tension instantly shattered. Noah hurried over and handed Vincent a piece of paper. Vincent looked down. It was a drawing. A childlike picture of the mansion beneath a bright blue sky. Birds filled the air. Flowers covered the lawn. 3 stick figures stood near the front entrance. One was Noah. One was Emily. The third sat in a wheelchair. Above the drawing, written in large, uneven letters, were 4 simple words. "Our big, weird family." Noah smiled proudly. "I made your hair better this time." Emily laughed despite herself. Vincent continued staring at the drawing. Nobody spoke. Finally, Noah pointed toward the figure in the wheelchair. "That is you." Vincent nodded slowly. "I figured that out." "And that is me." "I figured that out too." Noah pointed at Emily. "And that is Mom." Vincent's eyes softened slightly. "I managed to solve that one as well." Noah grinned. Then he said something so casually that neither adult was prepared for it. "I think Grandma Sarah would like you." The smile vanished from Vincent's face. Emily immediately frowned. "Noah, you never met Grandma Sarah." "I know." Noah shrugged. "But Mom talks about her all the time." Vincent looked back at the drawing. At the 3 figures standing together beneath the bright sky. Something deep in his memory stirred. A voice. A melody. A face he had spent 20 years trying not to remember. And for the first time in a very long time, Vincent Moretti found himself afraid of the past. That night, sleep refused to come. Vincent sat alone in his study long after the rest of the mansion had gone quiet. A single lamp cast a warm circle of light across the desk while rain whispered against the windows. In front of him rested an old wooden box he had not opened in years. Dust coated the edges. The brass latch showed signs of age. Slowly, he lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, letters, and fragments of a life he had buried beneath 2 decades of silence. At the very bottom sat a faded picture of a young woman standing beside a lake, her hair dancing in the summer wind. Sarah. Vincent stared at the image. The same gentle eyes. The same soft smile. The same woman whose voice had once filled every empty corner of his world. His chest tightened. He had spent 20 years convincing himself that the past belonged in the past. Then Emily had walked through his front door, carrying the same melody Sarah used to hum. The same kindness. The same stubborn honesty. It felt impossible. Yet every day brought another reminder. Vincent reached for one of the letters folded inside the box. The paper had yellowed with age. He recognized Sarah's handwriting instantly. He always would. Before he could open it, a soft knock interrupted the silence. His assistant stepped inside. "Sorry to bother you, sir." Vincent closed the box. "What is it?" "You asked me years ago to alert you if I ever came across anything connected to Sarah Carter." Vincent's eyes narrowed. "Go on." The assistant hesitated. "After Emily arrived, I did some checking." The room suddenly felt colder. "And Emily's mother was Sarah Carter." Vincent went completely still. For several seconds, neither man spoke. The rain outside seemed louder than before. Are you certain? Vincent asked quietly. Yes. His assistant handed over a thin folder. Vincent opened it slowly. Birth records, employment history, public records. Every page pointed toward the same conclusion. Emily Carter was Sarah's daughter. Vincent stared at the documents as memories flooded back. Summer evenings beside the lake. Shared dreams. Promises whispered beneath starlight. Then one day Sarah had disappeared from his life without explanation. No goodbye, no answers, only silence. He had searched for months. Eventually he stopped. Life moved forward, or at least it pretended to. Vincent lowered the folder onto the desk. Did Emily know? There is no indication she knows anything about your connection to her mother. The assistant paused. Should I continue investigating? Vincent looked toward the dark window. His reflection stared back at him. Older, tired, haunted. No. The answer came immediately. The assistant nodded and quietly left the room. Alone once more, Vincent sat without moving. Then his gaze drifted toward the family drawing Noah had given him earlier that week. It still rested on a nearby shelf. 3 smiling figures beneath a bright blue sky. Our big, weird family. Vincent felt something unfamiliar stir inside him. Not grief. Not regret. Hope. Small. Fragile. Dangerous. The kind of hope he had sworn never to feel again. Upstairs, the mansion remained peaceful. Emily and Noah slept unaware that a door to the past had just opened. And for the first time in 20 years, Vincent found himself wondering whether some people enter your life by accident, or whether they find their way back exactly when they are needed most. The days that followed felt different, though nobody openly acknowledged it. The mansion remained as grand as ever. The routines remained unchanged, and the rain still drifted across the Hudson every few evenings. Yet something invisible had shifted. Vincent found himself leaving his study more often. At first it was only for a few minutes, then an hour, then entire afternoons spent in rooms he had ignored for years. One bright Saturday morning, Emily found him sitting in the sunroom while Noah worked on a puzzle spread across a low coffee table. Sunlight spilled through the glass walls, warming the room with a golden glow. Noah held up a puzzle piece triumphantly. Found it. Vincent glanced over. You said that 5 minutes ago. That was a different piece. Of course it was. Noah grinned. Emily stood quietly in the doorway watching them. She still found it difficult to believe this was the same man she had met weeks earlier. The sharp edges remained. The guarded expressions remained. But now there were cracks in the armor. Small openings where light occasionally slipped through. Later that afternoon, Vincent's physical therapist arrived for the weekly session. Normally these appointments were short and tense. Vincent tolerated them out of obligation rather than belief. Over the years, hope had become harder than disappointment. Emily was organizing supplies nearby when she noticed something unusual. Vincent was paying attention, not pretending, not enduring, actually listening. The therapist guided him through a familiar series of exercises. Movements repeated hundreds of times before. Movements that rarely produced results. Yet this time Vincent did not ask how much longer remained. He did not complain. He did not withdraw into silence. He simply continued. Across the room, Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing superheroes. Every few minutes he looked up. You are doing great, he announced. Vincent raised an eyebrow. You have no medical qualifications. I know. Noah shrugged. But you are still doing great. The therapist smiled. Emily smiled too. Even Vincent fought back what looked suspiciously like amusement. The session continued. Minutes passed. Then something happened. Tiny. Almost invisible. Vincent's foot shifted. Barely half an inch. The therapist froze. Emily froze. Vincent stared downward. For a moment nobody spoke. The room seemed to hold its breath. Did you see that? The therapist asked quietly. Emily nodded. Vincent continued staring at his foot. 20 years of specialists. 20 years of reports. 20 years of hearing the same careful explanations. Yet in that moment, none of them mattered. Because for the first time and longer than he could remember, something had moved. The therapist quickly composed herself. It could be a positive response to increased engagement and consistency. Vincent remained silent. Noah looked confused. Is that good? The therapist smiled. That is very good. Noah immediately jumped to his feet. I knew it. Vincent looked at him. You knew what? That you were getting stronger. Vincent shook his head. You have absolutely no evidence for that. Statement. Noah smiled. I do now. Laughter filled the room. Warm, natural, unforced. And as sunlight streamed through the windows, Vincent realized something far more important than a physical improvement had already happened. For the first time in 20 years, he had started imagining a future again. Autumn arrived quietly along the Hudson River. The trees beyond the estate shifted from deep green to shades of gold and amber, and for the first time in years, Vincent found himself noticing the change. One afternoon, while Noah was at school and Emily was reviewing schedules in the office, Vincent received an unexpected visitor. His assistant entered carrying a sealed envelope. This arrived this morning. Vincent accepted it without much interest. Most correspondence involved business matters he no longer cared about. But the moment he opened the envelope, his expression changed. Inside was an old photograph. The edges were worn. Time had faded the colors. Yet the image was unmistakable. Sarah stood beside a lakeside dock, smiling into the camera. Next to her stood a younger Vincent. His breath caught. There was no note, no return address, nothing except the photograph. For several minutes he stared at it. Then he noticed something on the back. A date. And beneath the date, a location. A small town in upstate New York. The same town where he and Sarah had spent one unforgettable summer decades earlier. That evening, Vincent sat alone in the library studying the photograph when Emily entered carrying tea. She immediately noticed the look in his eyes. Are you all right? She asked gently. Vincent hesitated. Then he handed her the picture. Emily looked down. Her face softened instantly. That is my mother. Vincent nodded. Yes. Emily traced the edge of the photograph with her finger. She was beautiful. She was. The answer came so quietly that Emily almost missed it. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emily smiled faintly. She used to tell me that people come into our lives for a reason. Vincent looked toward the window. Did she believe that? Always. Emily lowered the photograph. Even when life did not make sense. Her words lingered in the room long. After she stopped speaking. Later that night, Noah joined Vincent in the sunroom carrying a school project. It was a family tree assignment. Sheets of colored paper spilled from his backpack. I need help, Noah announced. Vincent raised an eyebrow. You are asking the wrong person. Nope. Noah sat beside him. You are good at puzzles. Vincent reluctantly examined the project. Names branched across the page. Parents. Grandparents. Great-grandparents. Stories connected through generations. Noah pointed at an empty section. This is the part about people who matter even if they are not family. Vincent looked confused. Your school has that category? My teacher says family is not always about biology. Noah smiled proudly. Sometimes it is about who shows up. The words landed harder than the child realized. Vincent stared at the paper. Who shows up? Such a simple idea. Yet for years he had surrounded himself with employees, advisors, and associates while convincing himself he needed nobody. Across the room, Noah carefully added another branch to the project. Then he wrote a name. Vincent Moretti. Vincent's eyes widened. What are you doing? Noah looked up. You show up. The room fell silent. Outside, golden leaves drifted across the lawn beneath the evening sky. Inside, a man who had spent 20 years protecting himself from loss suddenly understood what frightened him most. It was not his past. It was the possibility of losing the people who had brought him back to life. The first snowfall arrived earlier than expected that year. By late afternoon, soft white flakes drifted across the estate grounds, covering the gardens and winding pathways in a blanket of silver. Noah pressed his face against the window and gasped. It is snowing. Within seconds he was pulling on boots, a coat, gloves, and a hat that seemed slightly too large for his head. Emily laughed as she helped him zip his jacket. Do not stay out too long. I will only be outside for 5 minutes. Emily raised an eyebrow. That means at least 30. Noah grinned and raced toward the back lawn. From the sunroom, Vincent watched the boy charge into the fresh snow as though he had just discovered a new planet. Every step left tiny footprints behind him. Every laugh carried through the cold winter air. Something about the sight made Vincent smile. He had spent years staring through these same windows. Yet somehow the world looked different now. More alive. More worth noticing. A few minutes later, Noah began constructing what he proudly announced would be the largest snow fort in New York. Emily stepped outside to help. Together they rolled oversized snowballs across the lawn, laughing whenever they collapsed apart. Through the glass, Vincent found himself watching longer than intended. Then something happened. Noah attempted to drag a snow-covered branch several feet longer than he was tall. Predictably, it did not go well. The branch became tangled. Noah stumbled into a snowbank and disappeared completely. Emily immediately hurried toward him. Vincent's smile vanished. Before he even realized what he was doing, he had pushed his wheelchair toward the door. By the time he reached the patio entrance, Emily had already helped Noah sit up. The boy was laughing, completely unharmed. Yet Vincent remained frozen at the doorway. His heart was pounding, not from fear, from instinct. For one brief moment, his only thought had been reaching them, getting there, helping, protecting. The realization unsettled him. Outside, Noah brushed snow from his coat and looked toward the patio. "Vincent," he shouted, "come help us." Vincent glanced down at the wheelchair, then back at the child. Emily watched quietly. She saw uncertainty cross his face, then frustration, then something else, determination. Slowly, Vincent gripped the sides of the doorway. The cold winter air rushed around him. His muscles trembled. The world seemed to narrow. Years of doubt pressed against him. Years of failure. Years of believing certain things would never change. Noah smiled from across the lawn. "You can do it." Such simple words. Yet they carried more power than any speech. Vincent tightened his grip. For several seconds nothing happened. Then his body shifted forward. One foot, then the other. Not far. Not steady. Only a few seconds. But long enough. Long enough for him to stand. Emily covered her mouth. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Noah erupted with excitement. "Mom! Mom! Look!" The snow continued falling around them as Vincent remained upright, breathing hard, staring at the world from a height he had not experienced in 20 years. It lasted only a moment before he carefully settled back down. Yet the moment was enough. Because standing was not the miracle. The miracle was that he had wanted to reach someone more than he feared falling. And for the first time in 20 years, hope no longer felt fragile. It felt real. Winter slowly gave way to spring. Snow melted from the estate grounds, revealing green grass beneath, and sunlight lingered longer across the Hudson each evening. Life inside the mansion no longer resembled the silent place Emily and Noah had first entered months earlier. Laughter appeared where silence once lived. Conversations replaced closed doors. Even the staff seemed lighter, as though the entire house had finally exhaled. One Saturday morning, Noah raced through the kitchen carrying a school certificate above his head. "I got first place." His voice echoed through the halls. Emily hugged him immediately. Moments later, Vincent rolled into the room. Noah proudly handed over the certificate. Vincent studied it with exaggerated seriousness. "Impressive." Noah grinned. "You sound surprised." "I am maintaining professional objectivity." Noah laughed. "That means yes." It had become their language, their routine, their family. Later that afternoon, Emily found Vincent sitting near the gardens, watching the river sparkle beneath the afternoon sun. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. For a while neither spoke. Then Vincent handed her an envelope. Emily frowned. "What is this?" "Open it." Inside was a collection of documents. Her eyes widened as she read. The papers established a charitable foundation dedicated to helping families facing medical hardship and long-term rehabilitation challenges. She looked back at him in confusion. "You created this?" Vincent nodded. "No." His voice softened. "We created it." Emily felt emotion rise in her throat. "Vincent." He smiled. "For 20 years I believed my life had already happened. I thought the best parts were behind me." His eyes drifted toward the river. "I was wrong." A few moments later Noah appeared carrying a baseball glove and immediately interrupted the serious conversation. "Are you two coming or not?" Emily laughed. "Coming where?" Noah pointed toward the lawn. "Outside." Then he looked directly at Vincent. "And no excuses." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "You are becoming very demanding." "That means yes." Noah repeated Vincent's own words back to him. The boy's grin was impossible to resist. A short time later they stood together beneath the warm spring sun. Noah tossed a baseball into the air and chased after it. Emily laughed as he nearly tripped over his own feet. Vincent watched them both. The woman who had unknowingly carried a connection to his past. The child who had somehow taught him how to hope again. The family he never expected to find. Slowly, carefully, Vincent rose from his chair. The movement remained difficult. It remained imperfect. But this time nobody gasped. Nobody stared, because standing was no longer the miracle. Living was. Emily reached for his hand without thinking. Vincent squeezed it gently. Together they watched Noah run across the grass beneath a bright blue sky. For a long moment nobody spoke. They did not need to. The river flowed. The trees swayed. The future stretched before them. And Vincent finally understood something that 20 years of doctors had never been able to teach him. Healing begins when someone gives you a reason to keep going. The woman who arrived needing a job had given him that reason. The little boy who offered friendship had given him that reason. In the end, they did not simply change his life. They gave it back to him.